Hello there again. Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today we will be thinking about drawing. The line in the stone. January, in the year 897. A courtroom in Rome. In the defendant's chair sits a pope who has been dead for 9 months. His name was Formosus. The reigning pope ordered the body pulled from its tomb, dressed in full vestments, and propped upright for trial. Church law required that a defendant answer, so the synod supplied a voice. A junior deacon stood beside the throne and replied to the prosecution on the dead man's behalf. The court convicted the corpse, stripped the vestments from it, cut the 3 blessing fingers from the right hand, and threw what remained into the Tiber. A monk fished the body from the reeds and kept it hidden until saner men could bury it again. History filed the cadaver synod under medieval grotesque, a horror story from the dark centuries, safely behind us. I've just published a book arguing that the method of that courtroom never died, and that it sits today, in robes, on the highest bench in America. The new book is called Barbarous Ancestors, A Natural History of Rule by the Dead, from the Cadaver Synod to the Seance Court. 90,000 words, 4 parts, 1 argument. Putting the dead on the stand and governing the living by the verdict is a recurring disease of institutions, and constitutional originalism is its current American outbreak. I call it a natural history because the book treats reverence for the dead the way a physician treats a fever. Identify the pathogen, trace the outbreaks, name the carriers, and end with the cure. Listeners of this show know what a meme is in the older, rigorous sense, a unit of culture that copies itself from mind to mind. Rule by the Dead may be the oldest meme on record, and the book follows its replication across 1,000 years of respectable institutions. December 14th, 1799. George Washington wakes before dawn at Mount Vernon, unable to breathe, and the best physicians in the Republic take 5 pints of blood out of him in about 12 hours, close to 40% of what his body held, because a chain of venerated texts reaching back to Galen prescribed the lancet. The men holding the lancet had credentials and good intentions, and a dead authority they trusted over the living body in front of them. Imperial China graded the governing minds of a civilization for 5 centuries against 1 12th century edition of Confucius, and paid for that reverence when navies arrived from nations that had stopped grading that way. The concert hall sold us an authentic Bach that Bach would never recognize, a modern invention in a powdered wig. The forger's market boomed for 1,000 years because reverence pays. The donation of Constantine handed the papacy an empire, and it ruled until a philologist listened closely enough to hear the document confess its age. Chapter 9 makes the same case about Scripture and about print itself. Every original in your hands is an edition, with an editor standing between you and the origin. And then the pattern went retail. Late March 1848, in a farmhouse in Hydesville, New York, 2 girls named Fox founded the American industry of talking to the dead, and within a decade the country was paying mediums to relay the recovered will of the dead, a will that somehow always matched what the paying customer came to hear. Now put 9 justices in the darkened room. Originalism holds that the Constitution means what its ratifying generation understood it to mean and nothing since. The judge becomes a medium. The founding becomes the departed. Each landmark opinion in the modern line opens the archive and interviews the departed, then announces what the dead decided. And the announcement arrives, opinion after opinion, wearing the majority's own politics. That is a charge, and the book spends its middle two parts proving it, case by case. There is a sentence in Chapter 10 that I will read as it stands on the page. Originalism is founder worship built on the one generation that told us not to worship founders. The sting is that the founders left a verdict on ancestral authority in their own hands. Jefferson put it in letters to Madison in 1789 and to a Virginia lawyer named Kercheval in 1816. The earth belongs to the living. Madison sat up past midnight, year after year, revising his own convention notes, which means the sacred record the seance consults is a manuscript edited by its survivor. And that generation wrote an amendment clause into the document itself, a standing machine for overruling their own work. The book stages these scenes as dramatized interludes between the parts. Madison alone with his pen, Jefferson summoned to a deposition he never agreed to attend, and two workmen on a scaffold above the Mall in 1880. Those two workmen are why the cover of this book looks the way it does. The Washington Monument rose in two campaigns. The first broke ground in 1848, the same year as that farmhouse in Hydesville, and it died of money and politics at about 150 feet. That stump stood on the Mall through the Civil War and the broken decade after it, growing weeds. In 1880, Colonel Casey's engineers came back to finish the job, and they met a mineral problem. The Maryland bed that supplied the first campaign could no longer give a block worth having, so the new stone came down from a quarry in Massachusetts. When the fresh courses met the old ones, the colors refused to agree. The engineers knew the mismatch would show, and they built anyway, up to the aluminum cap in 1884. To this day, when late light rakes the obelisk, you can read a clean horizontal line at 150 feet. Below it stands what one generation managed. Above it stands what a later generation added, in its own stone, from its own moment, without apology and without disguise. That line is the cover of Barbarous Ancestors, and the book ends beneath it, because the seam is the antidote in mineral form. The founders left the Republic the way the first builders left the obelisk, unfinished and honest about it. And the fourth interlude closes with the sentence, "I wrote the whole book to earn." The living hand picks up the trowel, and it builds, and it lets the seam tell the truth. Barbarous Ancestors is available now from David Bowles Books at bowlesbooks.com and wherever books are sold. The Kindle edition, a 488-page paperback, carrying the seam across its wraparound cover, and a free PDF download on the site for anyone who wants the argument in hand. The next time you stand on the Mall, wait for the late light and find the line in the stone. Then ask which side of it your country is building on. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a good evening and a better tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be a human meme.